I'm delighted to welcome you to the Galway International Arts Festival Vinyl Hours. My name's Tiernan Henry and I host this thing that we do. And what we do with this thing is it's essentially a series of conversations with artists or creative people or musicians. And it's about understanding or having a conversation about the musical journey through the soundtrack of their lives, which is a fancy way of talking about. We just talk about songs that they really like. And Tom Waits reckons that, I love this quote, he said, songs are really just interesting things to do with the air. And what we like to do in Vinyl Hours is we like to talk about songs. We think that's not a bad thing to do either. Even if most of what we talk about is just bravado, as the Blue Nile would have it. Now, you'll be able to listen to all the playlists on the Galway International Arts Festival Spotify page. And if you like what you hear, please consider making a donation to Galway International Arts Festival, a non-profit organisation bringing the arts to people in Ireland and all around the world. So if you go to giaf.ie and click donate. But today's guest is Niamh Regan. She's from Kilreekle in East Galway and she grew up in a house full of music and song, and last year she released her debut album, which is, I call it Hemet.
You can call it right.
Hemet,
yes,
frankly right, to pretty much universal acclaim. It's an astonishingly confident, complicated and resonant record. It's melancholic and yet it's groovy. And I mean that in the best kind of way. It's full of groove. It's brilliant. And if you don't owe it, buy it. Great record. You won't regret it. And I saw somewhere, someone wrote or said, I think, that you were Galway's answer to Laura Marling.
I think it was Carol Murray on RT, the late night dates.
I don't know that you're an answer to, I don't think that's fair to anyone. You know, I think,
No
but you
pressure.
come from a tradition, I think, very definitely of music and song, and that's evident there, I think, in what you've written and the album that you've put together. So, just to wrap this up before we start, it's just to say we're here to talk about the songs and the things that move Niamh. So, without further ado, please welcome Niamh Regan to Vinyl Hours. There you go. Now we can talk about music. All right. So the list you've given us, I think it's a great list. It's fascinating. And I think one of the great things about doing these kind of things is when you listen to other people's lists, it is like the way we used to do mixtapes for people, you know, because there were always messages in those mixtapes, and they weren't just casually put together. You know, they were casually put together over about a month. Usually, you know, will she understand what this means, you know, or whatever, you know. So, I suppose maybe we'll start with a song in a second. But first off, thank you so much for doing this.
Not at all.
You know.
Thanks for having me. I'm shocked to be here.
No, it's a really good. It's as I say, it's a treat to have you here, and I think it's an awful thing that we do on this show, reducing your life down to 8 songs or else.
Don't judge me.
You know, and I suppose like your first choice is a relatively recent one, and we can kind of talk a little bit about what I got out of these in a couple of minutes. But Kay Tempest is the first artist you chose, and she's a spoken word poet. She's a performer. She's a novelist, and she's a playwright. And she's done 4 albums, and you've picked a track from her most recent album. I think it's the Book of Traps and Lessons. So, your first track is People's Faces.
Yeah.
So tell us about this.
So
why you picked it.
As you said, it's a more recent one, and not to say that I'm going to be talking about COVID or anything like that in this, but it really just hit a chord during that isolation period where we're all kind of like a bit terrified of what was going on. And I heard it on the radio, and I had heard the album but didn't really pay that much heed to it. And I can't remember what DJ said, but he was like, you know, the mask was slipping, and this idea, it was just so cathartic listening to it, and I just kept coming back to it, and felt like I was learning a lesson each time. Like there's so much packed in each sentence, or it's just, and even listening to it there catches me. But it was just really comforting the past year listening. She's a wise woman. She
is, and I suppose when I was listening, because again, I've listened to your list after, you know, kind of knowing who you are, and I think, did you pick up on the piano?
Absolutely,
yeah,
the space,
yeah.
And I think the production is just really tasty, and even her delivery, it's like just taking that second
Yeah.
before you just rush into it. Like when I talk, I'm just like, and like there's no impact. But then when I decide to sing, I try and figure out how I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You have the time to pick the space, and she's a master of that, I think.
Yeah, and we can't play them all at the moment, but if you do get a chance to listen to it, because there's parts of it where it's spoken, but then there's parts where she's almost singing. Almost, but not.
Yeah, it's really
but she's still
interesting.
talking. But
Yeah.
she changes the rhythm really slightly, just in the delivery.
But it
But
has
what the
such an
piano
impact.
doesn't.
Yeah.
And then she comes back to just.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to listen to the whole song.
Yeah. Well, we could just play the records and not say anything. We just tell them, no, we had a great conversation. You know? It just didn't record properly. But I suppose there's a couple of things that I noticed about it as well, because again, I go back to the piano, because the piano shows up a lot in the songs you've picked, and obviously the piano's all over your album. So was there a piano at home, or
Yes.
yeah?
Yeah.
And
I honestly didn't really turn to the piano until my later years. I don't know, I just always was drawn to the guitar.
Yeah.
And I was playing wind instruments for the majority of my life. But yeah, it's been a big foundation of my music in the past 5 years, I'd say.
do you find it
I'm drawn to-
easier to write on a piano, or like?
It just gives you a different voice, doesn't
Yeah.
it? You know, gives you a different mindset. You know, when you sit beside the guitar, you can
Yeah.
get into a rush of the same chords, the same kind of, it's almost muscle memory happens when you're trying to
Yeah.
find something new. So I wouldn't say I'm a great piano player, but like when I figure something, I'm like, oh, and it gives you a great like sense of joy. And like, I don't have that with guitar at the moment. So
Right.
yeah. We're going off track off Kay Tempest, but she's
Yeah, well,
great.
no, we go back to we can go back to that because I was just curious about you, and because so, and again, going back to Kay, I mean, have you listened to much else of her stuff?
Not that much,
Yeah.
to be honest, but
Yeah.
I feel like I've listened to this one song enough to say that I'm a huge fan.
Right.
I don't care what
Yeah.
she does. This
But-
is just
but
on
then-
a loop.
Yeah, but then I suppose isn't that kind of what music does for us?
Yeah.
Do you know, like people say, "Oh, I'm a big fan of X," or I don't like this type of music, and I always kind of think, how can you not like? There's got to be something in there you like. You
Find
just don't know
something.
it yet. So
I think there's like that idea of a good song or a good tune or anything is it gives you the space to find yourself in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And like every genre is like that's the purpose. So
Yeah.
you can't say I don't like that genre, but it
Yeah.
can be harder to find yourself maybe in scream punk or something if you grew up in a folk
Yeah.
background, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I suppose I remember I read a great quote a while ago from it was Alex Ross wrote it, but he was talking about when what's his name, Gershwin went to Paris in the early 20s. So Gershwin was really successful and rich at this point, and he was doing the European tour, but he was going to all the. He went to Vienna and Berlin and whatever. But he met Alban Berg in Paris, and they spent an afternoon playing music together. And Berg played a piece, and Gershwin said, "Nope, I'm not following that." And Berg's response was, "It's all song, it's all music. So
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, it's all music, And I think I suppose that's what I kind of, when you listen to the Kay Tempest, I think there's this gorgeous melody that kind of loops around and loops around. Just really gentle, kind of like a big open loop.
But it kind of it pulls you in.
It's
and hypnotic,
you're
almost
and,
that
yeah,
sense
and then
of
her
like,
voice sitting on top of it as well also kind of works in the loop.
Yeah.
And the two loops kind of cross over, and you get lost in it. You just get completely lost in it.
Which is, I totally agree with you, but I think another striking thing is her accent. She never loses it, and it's quite, you'd think it might be a bit like abrasive or harsh sometimes, because it's such a kind of like, so gentle, and then, and it just, I don't know, she's just, it all feels very genuine when you're listening to it, and you could be walking in the rain, or you could be sitting at home or doing whatever, and it just makes you stop. It just like, So.
And I suppose it is her voice. That's you kind of get a sense that it's a slightly higher version of her, probably of her speaking voice. But that's probably, if you met her, you'd be going, "God, you sound exactly like Kay Tempest."
I think I know you.
She doesn't have the Mid-Atlantic thing or whatever.
Yeah.
So, well, I suppose we can move on, because the thing I liked again about the next track you picked is it's the piano that grabs you right away.
Yeah, they're quite similar actually.
They are. They're not dissimilar, And but again, it's and this is the second track you've picked is the Lisa Hannigan track, and I think it's kind of unfortunate. I seem to think Lisa's been around forever. You know, like you just sort of think, or she's been around. But you think actually, it's important to remember. You know, not just to go, oh, Lisa Hannigan's been knocking about for years, but like it's about 20 years ago she heard Damien Rice start. You know, and then she's gone off on herself with her own thing, and she's 3 or 4 solo albums, and now seems to be a part-time member of Big Red Machine and The National, you know.
Yeah, well, I think the song that I picked, Aaron Desner produced.
Yeah.
So there's massive connections and overlaps. So.
And because I was listening to a little bit of the new Big Red Machine, and you kind of think, some of the piano things, I think he just works in a space that these things sort of work really well. So, tell us about this, or you and Lisa and you and Funeral Suitor.
So the idea when I was throwing this playlist together, I was like, okay, Tempest, love that, absolutely. And then Funeral Suitor just came straight to mind. And it felt like almost a progressive step, like it eased you into the playlist. So maybe, but anyway, this whole, I feel in this song and her lyrics and everything, it sets up a whole space. And I don't know what's happening exactly in the story. I never do. And I never want to, but I hear certain lines like a house that we borrowed for a while, or what do you like to do on a July evening? And then the succession of the drums with this most delicate piano. It almost feels like a funeral procession as the song builds, this kind of like, and yet like the piano stays steady and grounded, and her voice just floats and tells a story. It's so melancholic, but it also, as you said, it's not groovy, but I don't feel totally heartbroken after it. It kind of is like, phew, bad things happen. At Lisa Hannigan makes it okay. Like, but also there's a kind of a consistent, steady beat, and we were recording in my home house, and there's electric fence around keeping sheep in. But apparently there's something about grounding. I don't know the actual terms, but it was being picked up by the mics and everything, so we're getting this pulse the whole time. They're like, oh, we don't know how to do. We turned it off. That's how we got to the root. But for the moment, it was like, oh, what are we at? Like, and one of the lads played this track, and I said, oh, we could just maybe use it as a metronome, and there's this constant pulse. He was like, we could, you know. It didn't work for the particular song, but so yeah, I just have fond memories of listening to this song, both on my own and with people, and so, and also the guy that I play with quite often plays bass for Lisa, so like I got a great insight into how she approached just via him. I've never met her. I'd be starry-eyed, you know, but just those different approaches of storytelling and how you can do that with the band. So she's definitely knows what she's doing.
Yeah, and I think because when I read about this album, like she said she really struggled with not writing thing, but just to get a fix in it herself. She said she'd an awful hard time just getting a fix on what she wanted to do, you know. Yeah. And then her and Aaron Desner worked out, you know, and over a period of time they got it. But I think you're right. I think one of the things that I like about this, and it follows on from the Kate Tempest one, is that there's a huge amount of space in it. And it's not I suppose it's, like, even as a musician, are you ever afraid of leaving space?
I think it takes an awful lot of confidence to leave space. Like, I definitely am only I want to leave space, but you get nervous. You lose them. You barely have them. Do you know that kind of way? So you're like, oh, don't lie. Stay with me. You know what I mean? It takes an awful lot of poise and just like, no, I trust you to really come along for the journey and find what you want from this song. Because if you do verse after verse after verse, which I'm guilty of, you don't have time to process what's been sung, I suppose. God, I'm talking very fast now, I feel.
No, you're grand. You're fine. and I suppose, and like I was saying about Lisa has, you know, she worked with all this kind of floating group of people. Yeah. Do you have, like, you have a core group that you work with, but are you starting to move into, you know, are you starting to think or talk about working with other people, or just even, you know, informally or formally? Or
of course, and you know, I went and did music in college, so I think since 18 I've just been floating, playing with other people and constant collaboration. But like the people that played on the record, I play with them now for, you know, for most shows, and then the ones I can bring them along with me, and then now I'm like moving on, and like you get excited by working with new people because they bring something new.
Yeah.
It's like anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know. But some are going to be like old shoes, or you're just like, it's so comfortable, it feels great, and I never want to not play with you.
Yeah.
And then, so it's ebbs and flows.
Yeah, and like the songs, like say the songs on the album, do they change or are they fixed?
Oh, changed.
Yeah.
You'd get so bored.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That was you in the moment in the studio and the decisions. You, 6 months later, you're like, I wonder, would it be nice to put some Nashville guitar on this and spice it up and go country, you know? I think that's the beautiful thing about recording, because then this was a set time, but you don't have to stick to it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was a moment and you captured it.
Yeah, we go on a minute, but it's just to follow you, because you kind of raised, I'm so curious when I talk to musicians, just because I'm not a musician. But I'm just curious to how you do all this stuff. So when do you stop when you're in the studio? Like, when do you know, that's it? Don't put the 16th guitar track on it or whatever, you know.
Well, I think the beauty of tracking nowadays is like you can throw the kitchen sink at it, walk away for a day and come back and mute them and see what works. But back in the olden days, it's such discipline, or you just had, like, you must have just had a perfect year of balance of like, this is enough, and knowing when to call it a day. Now you have so much time to be like, mute this, add this, turn that, obviously that's mixing all the time, but so I'd say there's still a bit of wizardry in it.
Yeah,
but
of course. Well, there has to be, but that's, when you play the record, there's wizardry there,
Well, you just have a team of people to tell you to calm down.
Calm down and sing.
Don't overthink it, but you do.
That's great. And those first two tracks you played, and I guess this one as well, the one, because the next one you've selected is a tune. So we're shifting away from song to a tune, just very briefly. But the two, the Kay and the Lisa one, and I think just your own stuff, it creates in my head, I sometimes think of it because I'm nicking Kieran Carson's phrases, but I always think songs have a landscape. Like they have a topography, a shape to them. Absolutely. And singers can come at them from... Kieran Carson made this point about traditional song or traditional tunes. They're like a landscape, but not everyone comes into this on the same road. Some come down the mountain, so that's the way they play it, and some across. But it's still the same landscape, but you're just approaching it differently, I guess.
That's really nice. I hadn't heard that.
Kieran Carson, Peltoff, he's written a
like
brilliant
Tiernan
book.
said that. I take your quote.
You can quote me quoting Kieran Carson, definitely. But I suppose, because I think, again, with a lot of Irish music, I think it is, when you listen to the tune, you're just listening to a landscape almost. And this one is a really unusual one because of its construction, I guess, in some ways. So it's Martin Hayes and Brooklyn Ryder, and the track is P. Joe's Reel.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about this and your reactions to it.
When I saw the brief and it said this is about a bit of the track of your life or whatever, and which was not whatever, it was very scary to read actually. It's like, what is my soundtrack? But this song, I'm such a morbid kid. I picked a funeral song and I picked a song for my wedding and I picked all these. I was so crazy, I had nothing planned for my life but tracks. And this is one to walk up the aisle to, because I heard it. It's such a mischievous tune and it's just on a loop, and there's something. It's not melancholic, but there's something weird about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it just kind of, you get into a trance and it loops and it loops, and it's so simple. And I heard Martin Hayes play this with his father on, I think, the Lakes of Loch something. It's the White and Black album.
Yes, okay, right.
And he's playing with his father in a very casual setting. I think you can tell it's just in a room, and Des Cahill is playing mandolin, and it's so sparse. And it's definitely not the most polished performance, and it's so beautiful, and it's just, oh my God. I was like, that could be my funeral tune, and then I was like, but that could be my wedding tune also. And I couldn't pinpoint it. So there I've told the people that need to know that it's the PJ Hayes and Martin Hayes version for that, and then we walked up to this one, which wasn't the most perfect fit, but I was delighted with it. Everyone else was like, what? But I just love it. And as that keeps building, it just,
And you're right, but it's like it's like the other ones you've already played. There's a circularity to it. I don't know if that's the right word, but the loop just comes round.
Yeah.
And it's he's playing with a string quartet, and they're very I don't know what the term is. Polished isn't the right word. They're so precise. And yet he's got this thing over the top of it, which is kind of sliding in and around it.
Well, it's pure East Clare, isn't it?
Of course,
it's sneaky sound and the whole style.
And yet
funny.
He's always great. On the, like they're almost mathematically precise with the music.
Yeah.
And he's kind of dancing around it.
He's the
and
heart
yet he's
of it.
right with it.
Yeah.
He never,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I never saw them perform, but like that's a really good description of how he engages with classical musicians, because I remember hearing him talk about that he felt like a wild gorilla or something on the side of a mountain when he was playing with these. He was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm just feeling it. And I just love that sentiment, and I love that he's not afraid to not mess but explore with the tradition, like the fact he has recordings of him and his dad, and it's I really have no time for purists, because I don't think that's what got us music in the beginning. I have full time for people to acknowledge this is what was this era and this is what we represented. But it shouldn't, as long as you know where it came from, you should be allowed to explore. And I think Martin Hayes is the king of that.
Well, sure, look at Irish song, it just changes. Everyone adds a verse or removes
it's just
a verse.
landscape.
But you think how things evolve and are heard differently. Yeah. And then someone takes it off in some direction, and then that becomes the standard, or what or doesn't, And
I know, and I love the thing about trad is though you can write a new tune and go to the session, and like you play it, and but nobody might pay a bit of heed, but they'll start playing along with you as if they know it. And then if it's a good one, they're like, who is that? And that's when you know you're a good musician, by saying nothing. Yeah. You're like, oh, I don't know.
Just it up. Just heard it.
You're never clay, you know what I mean? But so.
Because funny enough, I thought Siobhan Long reviewed this album for the Irish Times, the Martin Hayes one, and the description is brilliant. She said it's a masterclass in risk taking.
Yeah.
And I suppose what some of it again kind of reminds me in a way about how democratic this stuff is. That Martin Hayes can play with these people, and it goes back to it's all music.
It's all music.
It's all music.
It's just music.
Yeah, or just and
we get very bothered by it sometimes. I think.
Yeah, but that's okay as well. And it's okay to be bothered by it, and not bothered by it. Yeah, for sure. But I think this is. I just can't. It's not that I can't get over it, but I think what's really interesting with these is there's loops in all of them that you've picked. That this circularity keeps popping up, and I guess that we'll do the next one, which is, I suppose there's a huge Galway connection to this song, even though it's not a Galway, not a Galway song, but it's become a Galway song because of who sang it. So this is it's John Faulkner and Dolores Kane, and it's an old one. It's from 1979. So it's the Bonnie Light Horsemen, and the album is the Broken Hearted I'll Wander. So.
Why?
Go on, Well, East Galway, obviously.
Yeah, she's just from Tuam, I think, around that area. But first of all, the album title is The Best Thing in the World, Broken Hearted I Will Wonder. I love the drama. But this song, this would be a heavy album in our family. My mum and my uncle, who are both passed now, were in a band called Folklore, Galway based, and they played in the King's Head. That was their main thing for years, and so there would have been a lot of songs copied and imitated from that. And like my mum, when I was kind of trying to figure out how to sing, that would have been a reference to Loris O'Riordan and Dolores Kane, and just that register and that like honesty in a voice, and trying to copy it. Which how can you do that? But you have to start somewhere. So I think this is just a really important album to my family, and I learned a lot of songs from it. And then also recently, a beautiful album, Bonnie Light Horsemen, I think, is out now.
The band, yeah.
The band.
Yeah.
And they've done amazing, like, taken old ballads and they've reshaped them and totally given them, again, breathed life? I don't know.
Yeah.
Give it a new lease of life to all these songs. I think it's like the Fruit Bats, what's the guy?
Anais Mitchell.
Anais Mitchell,
Yeah.
they're just fantastic. So once that album came out, I revisited this and it was like, wow, yeah. So that's it, yeah.
And because, and I think, you know, when you hear it, it's so Irish.
Even though he says home, very Scottish.
Yeah,
like, he says
and you know, and it's a song about, you know, the Napoleonic War. You know,
you have a lot to thank for him with all his tragedy and Iron Fist. There's so many songs, great wars bring great songs. That's really bad. I'm not for all what.
Leave that in. That's the headline.
No, but there's amazing songs out there because he did have so many wars. He broke so many. He's a terrible man. But anyway.
What a great influence.
So I'm getting.
And I think again, just what's good about, I suppose, one of the things is it's like John's guitar part is really it never varies. Mm-hmm. It's just this lovely little
like
gentle
crutch.
thing, and he just keeps it. You know, and then the other instruments, there's a little bit of instrumentation, not a huge
tin
amount.
whistle.
Yeah, just comes in and goes out. And
it's so tasty, like it's just so well placed in. And I think another man who does that really well, I don't know if you've heard of him, John Francis Flynn. He brought out a new album. It's Dublin based, and his album he just came out on something records, but River Lee Records, I think, maybe.
We'll find it. Yeah.
Anyway, unbelievable use of whistles, and he plays them at the same time himself. He sellotapes them. He's definitely worth checking out. He's amazing, and the same kind of tasty. Yeah. Sorry, I'm talking too much now, probably.
That's why we're here to see you talking too much.
God, I'm sorry.
So, like, this album was at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but were there other ones as well, sort of that were?
There would have been Patrick Street and Planksty for trad-wise, and then Andy Irvine and Paul Brady. They would have been just big hitters. Yeah. And let me think then. I suppose I didn't want to bring them in so much because I wanted to talk more about the cringy ones that I grew up listening to as well. I nearly had Busted in the list. I don't know if you remember Busted. They were like a boy band. But I was like, in case people...
No.
Yeah.
Not in this.
I couldn't shoot myself.
No.
But so a lot of trad, and a lot of Tom Waits and Van Morrison as well. Yeah, that's kind of
the usual suspects.
The usual suspects. Yeah, absolutely.
And then just before we go on again, just were you playing guitar or were you playing instruments
Flute.
all the time? Or, so flute from early on.
Since I was 5, I'd be playing tin whistle early morning.
Right.
Early. I was, as I said, I was a weird child. Like I practiced so much the whistle and flute, and then guitar around 11. Yeah. I got into it, and then songwriting. Yeah. Just came from that. And piano, I was brought to piano lessons, but I definitely wasn't as pushed at the time.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, how am I going to play the piano in the session that you
won't
let me go
around.
to?
Exactly.
But yeah.
Well, you know, your next choice is come back sticking with the piano. you're putting the case up for the piano now, and this is it's Regina Spektor.
This is my teenage love. Like I absolutely was obsessed with how she sang and played the piano. Yeah.
So Samson.
I think it's great, like how she used. Is it a parable, a legend, or just this idea of a concept from a story of like, that all your power is within the hair, and if it's cut, you're nothing, or you're not nothing, but you're weak and fragile and vulnerable. And I just thought it was great that she could intertwine that kind of storytelling into a personal love song. Yeah. And that blew my mind. I think the album came out when I was 14 or 15, and I was like, this is how it's done. Little light piano, strings. Yeah. I loved it.
That age, when an album lands at that age, it just
really
becomes...
hits you. It's a part of your identity. And I think there was like that idea of like, when you're a teenager, the types of music was your groupings. Do you know what I mean? Like ridiculous, but there's something to it.
Yeah.
Do you know? Yeah.
So, like, when you were listening to this, did you play these things? Could you could you play along with them, or did you try and play along with them?
I couldn't play her piano, but I would always just go on Cordy Ultimate Guitar and I'd do my own versions and stuff. Yeah, like that's how you get doing it, isn't it? It's just,
you just play
copy and play along.
Yeah.
And then I discovered the capo and I was like, oh, I can play everything, to the tracks. So that was the worst thing that could have happened to me. I got so lazy. But yeah, it's really fond memories. That was like locking in with an artist like that when you're young, and it can mean a lot. Yeah.
And just like, where did you hear her? I mean, where, like, do you know where you got introduced her to her?
Yeah, it was an Extravision. I don't know if there might be people who are too young to remember Extravision, but going in to get a movie or a film to rent it, and there was like a CD rail, and this was the new album, and I was like, oh. Yeah. And I pestered, I don't know who was with me, but they bought it for me. And I think it's, To Begin to Hope was the name of the album, I think, which is also a gorgeous title. But yeah. So.
But like, you can see, listening to it there, she leaves, like there's strings coming in behind her. But there's a huge amount of space in the melody line in the piano.
Yeah.
And what I think is, like, she establishes it really quickly, so it's in there, and then she kind of moves around it. And like, the funny thing is, because I hear that in yours, like.
But sure, I'm just copying Regina.
Exactly. But I definitely hear it in your stuff, because, and it's not to knock it, because there's a place for the 3-chord stuff that just But one of the things I think that I think is so interesting about the music you do is that I don't mean it in an intellectual way, or to over-intellectualize it, but just that you take us on this lovely wander, around at this space that you've created, and you give us that space in the song as well. So the melodies, I think, are really fascinating, and you always change the song about halfway through it. Something comes in that's unexpected, and you go, where'd that come from? But it works, So.
Gosh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it too much, but I suppose I have been influenced by Regina Spektor a good bit. Yeah. Thank you, though. I'm glad you like wandering, or went wandering even.
So we'll get a bit noisier with the next one you have. This is Big Thief. It's from their most recent album.
Yeah, 2019. I think,
and one thing I love about Big Thief is their names. So it's I'm going Adrian Lenker, she's the singer. Buck Meek, guitarist. Max Olierchik and James Krivchenia. Yeah. And you just think they had to be in a band
together.
They sound
as good as...
They just sound like a band.
so good together.
Okay. So tell us about this.
Well, it's the only song I've ever come across that it starts with the same thing. Like every sentence, it's either it's not or nor the whole way through. And if you're reading it, just the lyrics, it's like you almost feel like you're rapping. It just falls off your tongue. It's amazing songwriting. I still don't know what's going on in it, and I never want to know. Yeah. It's like I just love getting lost in any of the Big Thief stuff. Like, I mean, Adriana Lanker's most recent solo stuff is definitely probably the most influential the last year as well. Like, holy moly, great guitar player, unbelievable writer, so poignant in her choices with words. But this particular song is just a journey. Yeah. Like, it's not, you don't feel like you're wandering, you feel like you're trudging with them. Oh, yeah. And they're so aggressive with it that I love the build, and it feels really live. And And
we were saying, because what I do is when I get the list, I always Google some of this stuff. Some of the stuff you kind of heard, and then it makes loads of sense when you read it. And they essentially made this album live. It's not recorded live in front of us. It's just recorded. Like, they wanted to all sit around at exactly the same time and play it exactly the same time. And you can hear it in the drums. The drums aren't recorded brilliantly, but that's just because they're in this big room. And this track, as you say, it just, when you look at the lyrics written out, it goes on and on and on. And the images that she picks up,
so intense,
not your spine tattoo is the one that's stuck in my head, But it goes and it goes and it goes, and it builds and it builds, and then they play the guitar, and we were saying it beforehand. I don't understand why the song doesn't fall apart, because there's obviously no way they rehearsed that guitar part.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd love
Yeah.
to have been there and
Yeah.
seen it out. They've done a lot of things. They've re-released a lot of the stuff live from the bunker as well.
Yeah.
That was so. I didn't realise that this was done live that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's just unbridled at the end, and it's just like you either, if you were in a bad mood, you mightn't want to get in on it.
Yeah.
But it's all like music has timing, isn't it? Like you like listening to certain things in the morning or
Yeah.
in the evening and all that kind of thing. So yeah, don't know what. I'd probably evening for this song. I don't know. I'm really angry with how the day went or something, and it's just I don't know.
And the funny one is, remember when we were saying it, when this came out, I just kept playing it again and again. Because you play it and you go, holy God, how did we do
something
that?
about
And then you just
looping.
keep going back and you go, and you still can't get it.
Yeah.
It just goes. I mean, you're kind of watching it, kind of open mouth, and enjoying it.
Yeah.
This is brilliant, but every time we listen to it, you think it's still going to collapse, even though you know it's not going to collapse. But you know.
Well, is it playing
Yeah.
with people's expectations?
Yeah. And I suppose, because the other thing that it reminds me of as well, which is, it's the same sort of space. It's when Neil Young did his, he recorded an album with the crowd from Seattle. Can't pop their name. Eddie Vedder's band. Pearl Jam. He recorded an album with Pearl Jam, Mirrorball. And there's a song called I'm the Ocean on it. And it's exactly like that.
Really?
And I saw them playing it live once, and you could see the band, they were loving it, because he was just out doing what Neil Young does, and he obviously gave them this freedom
Yeah.
that the
Trust.
song could just, and he just builds and builds, and then he just goes and does one of his guitar solos, and and you can see them going, we never play like this. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. It's like taking your shoes off, walking on the grass kind of thing.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's a good, So your next choice is, we're near, we've just a couple left, and we've a couple of really good ones to talk about. Then it's Talking Heads is your next choice.
Yeah.
And it's, the song is This Must Be the Place. So what Talking Heads? Why this one?
Talking Heads would have been another one on loop, more so when I was in my teenagers. My dad was a big fan of them, but I used to try and learn whistle parts to it.
That's what I was thinking with that.
I used to be playing along with that, and I just loved the whole thing, and the whole the theme of the song is my favorite thing in the world. That idea of this is a love song in the most non-cheesy sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole key of writing, isn't it? It's like you can express a very complex sentiment in a very simple way, and he nails it with the lyrics. I think, like, Sheeny Mackers, and like from even now, I've heard it a million times, and I still want to get up and move. And I remember watching I can't remember what it was, the live one. It was the full album.
That Stop Making Sense, was it?
That was it.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing, like, I feel terrible now not having her name. Was it Tina, the bass player? Is it Tina?
Yeah, Tina Weymouth. Yeah.
I was like, wow. I just presumed it was a man. I remember seeing it really young, and I was like, Jeannie Max, like, as in, it was it was a strong point. A strong point? A big thing when I was young, seeing that, like, as in, not being the star or anything, just like total, like, strong backline, you know, not like, she was dancing like the rest of them, but it wasn't like just, ooh, you know. She's just, I remember just really loving that about Talking Heads.
Yeah, like, certainly,
female.
like in the early, but I always remember that as well, that they just looked so ordinary, except, when they did that, when you saw the film stuff. But in earlier albums, you kind of think, they're wearing clothes. They're like, that's the kind of clothes people wear, and they just looked like ordinary people, But, they were an astonishing band. And like, I found this great quote, which is ridiculous, but it's a really critic's quote. They described that track, This Must Be the Place, as deeply thumping funk disguised as modern rock. It's even hard to rate it out, deeply thumping funk.
Yeah, it is hard to say.
But you could see I think it was really great, like, about this album, or around this time, I suppose, for them, was they kind of did shift. They opened up a little bit into what they were listening to.
Yeah.
The things that they
There's
were
so many
listening to.
polyrhythms and it just counter ideas, but it's so smooth all the same. Like how they made it all work. And it's weird, I think they all came from a music college, didn't they? Like they all went to the same college. It's really bizarre to have something so successful out of, like, we went to learn and we actually actually did what we went to learn, and we like, you know, we
there's your
absolutely,
roadmap.
yeah, here it is.
You know?
Oh, perfect, Talking Heads. Like, I think the entire country of music schools are trying to.
Yeah.
There still hasn't been. I think the Fontaines DC are the Irish version of Talking Heads. They went to BIM, got the roadmap, and are doing us all proud. They're like everywhere.
Yeah.
So.
And like, so you're right in a way, because there's certainly in the early Talking Head stuff, there's a real angularity to the, you know, there's loads of right turns and there's hard turns and sharp bits to everything they do. Yeah. And it's still here in this stuff, but they've just got these other elements in there as well, you know, because like the guitar parts are still the guitar things that they were doing, you know, this little scratchy guitar in the background, but it just fits perfectly with these, you know, the kind of either the kind of Caribbean drums or the South American drums or the African kind of sounds that they were starting to incorporate.
It's amazing,
and it just works.
Yeah, like it sounds like it could be messy. Like if you saw that on paper and you were the producer, like, it's going to be a long day. But it's just perfect, a perfect marriage of all of them.
Yeah,
so trust to the process. Yeah.
So this gets us to your last track.
Are you okay? I feel like we're talking an awful lot and that, like.
They know it's advertised as us talking.
I know, but
this is not a surprise, I hope, at this stage. You know, so, you know.
Just a quick check-in on the same.
You're in the right room, aren't you? So your last track. Okay, what we do is this is another slow burner that you need to kind of let this one build. So it's Arcade Fire from their second album. So why or
why? Well, again, I was trying to think about like my life, like as in I remember, you know, turning points when I was young and albums and Neon Bible. I remember a friend burning it for me. Do you remember people burn CDs? And
I
they
remember
were like,
people recording cassettes.
Jesus.
You know, and there's people out there who do this, you know, so.
Well, I just remember getting a burnt CD of Neon Bible,
Right,
and they wrote on the CD in neon markers that had not stick. It didn't work, and it was like just highlighter all over it.
Right.
And I was like, what's this? Stuck it on. I was like, mind blowing. Loved every little bit of it. Trying to get it up on my brother's iPod, you know, uploading it. It was an absolute nightmare. Went out and bought the album. Felt very good about that. Love Arcade Fire. They were everything I dreamed of if I had a band. And I was cool and played electric guitar and wasn't from a trad background going to Kyoto's in a little waistcoat to compete in Group Kyo. I was so uncool. I still am, but I just remember Arcade Fire was my little, like, oh, I could do that. I know what they're doing in their music. And I loved it. I just remember them giving me a lot of confidence sitting on the bus home from school being like, yeah.
When you have an album like that, that's sort of in your, you know, that like it becomes part of your DNA, I guess. Yeah. Do you want to hear them play it live, or do you want to hear just the thing that's yours?
I think there is an element of this is mine, because I was at a time where there probably wasn't going to get to an Arcade Fire gig from rural Galway at the time. Probably wasn't going to make it. But yeah, I think it made, like, a lot of the lyrics is quite rebellious, or just very much like go get them kind of thing, in the most relaxed way in their phrasing and their sentences, yet like really thumping, thriving. I suppose it's indie rock. I hate labeling things, but they did the chug, but still refined a certain amount of musicality in it. It wasn't just here's everything. There would be like this organ line that you'd be like, holy cow, how did they get that in and make that work so well? So it was just don't know what I'm saying anymore at this point. I've never talked so much.
No, that's all right.
No.
Well, we're nearly done, so, you know, and then you're free to go, and then we'll bring you back next year and repeat the process. So
new playlist, new life,
exactly,
new me.
But and would you like to play with a band that big?
Yeah, I think I'd love it. Even though, like, I have a very small band at the moment, and it's so much to juggle. I can't imagine, and they're married as well. I think they started the two heads are married, and they have a brother, and I couldn't imagine a family dynamic in on top of a band. Like, oh my God, so much to juggle, but they nail it. And I love that idea of like big army. Like, and even this sounds like big army effect of like all in, let's go. And I like that approach. There's something communal, there's something empowering about it. And like that said, I haven't listened to Arcade Fire now in years, but that was a big thing for me growing up. That wasn't trad.
When you were listening to it, like if you listen back to it now, do you know every single note of it?
Yeah, but that said, I couldn't sing the lyrics without them singing.
Yeah.
But like I remember being so passionate about, working for the church while my family dies. I was 17. Like, what was I? But like, I just, for some reason, it hit something, and I don't know. I loved it. I just thought very dramatic.
That goes back. I mean, that's just. I think there's that age, and it's sort of your late teens.
Yeah.
Stuff just becomes.
It's all very serious.
Yeah. But also then, it just seeps into you, and you have time to listen to it.
That's
and
the
listen
thing.
to it, and listen to it, and listen to it,
Yeah, and I think there's a huge thing of wanting to be taken seriously at that age as well, so badly.
Yeah.
Or like so many songs, especially in the indie rock genre, convey that idea of being misunderstood.
Right.
So it's perfect mix.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
It's been such a blast talking to you about music and all the other stuff. So I really appreciate it. So everyone, please, Niamh Regan.